Well, welcome to another story and another video in my one company, one story series. This time, vertical aerospace. And since I mentioned those other ones, I've actually been doing this long enough that let's see if I can bring that up. There we go. Got 17 other companies I've done this for, so there you go. On YouTube and on my blog, of course. There's my blog. There's my blog. Details are in the descriptions. Anyway, here comes the amateur legalese. I began investing in companies and their stocks in the late 70s, but am not a certified investment professional. I wrote a book on by request called Dream Invest Live, and Kindle and paperback. What do you know? Which came out just as the Great Recession hit, which was terrible timing, and luck does play a role in investing as well as in writing. But let's just remind you that this is not investment advice. This is not financial advice. I am not an investment professional. In this case, I have some understanding of the technology because I have a master's in aerospace and engineering, but I haven't done that work in decades. Okay, but here we are. Vertical aerospace is pioneering electric aviation. It says so right there on their own website. There certainly is a new era in aviation as autonomy, electric power, and variants of quadcopters and whatnot try to find out how they're going to fit into our aerial reality. It's not always going to be, long, skinny airplanes with wings with engines hung underneath them anymore. Vertical aerospace looks positioned to benefit whichever way the trends go to some extent, and other companies are too, so they're not alone in this. Autonomy is in use, particularly in drone deliveries. Um, you can imagine just scaling up some of the things you've seen in some of the ads. Well, this is for carrying people, not just for drones and the packages that they have. The best early passenger test is probably, though, the autonomous auto market. If you think about the issues they've been having there, they've had some traffic issues, and that was only in 2D. So, straight take a left, take a right, go forward, go back kind of thing. And here you get the ad up and down at the same time. 3D is more complicated and hazardous because instead of cars sitting at traffic lights, which has happened, air vehicles eventually have to land. Everything that goes up does have to come down unless it's escape velocity. That's going to require some work. Electric power is also becoming ubiquitous. Range is limited in aerial operations, but improving battery technology is near. In the meantime, range is expected to be about 100 miles with 4 passengers. So you can say this is not an enormous vehicle, but it's also not just a one-seater either. So operations are expected to be intercity or city to airport. I live on an island and can fantasize about hopping over the intervening water when the waves are too tall, or the tides are wrong, or the currents are too strong, or whatever. Let's see what we got here. Yeah. Um, the use of quadcopters for drones, and granted, this is not a quad. It's not a quad. But the use of quadcopters, though, has been the sort of thing that familiarizes people with blades on top of wings, multiple propellers operating on a vehicle, as compared to 4 engines pointing straight ahead. We have things that point up and then point aside. It might actually be benefiting from the fact that, well, the quadcopter thing as well, but also here go to a vehicle that's been flying since 1989, I believe, which is the V-22. And this is now used primarily in the military, kind of faster than a helicopter and still able to take off and land. So it's got some of the complexities because transitioning from vertical flight to horizontal flight is non-trivial. Notice one thing that kind of limits the V-22, though, is the size of the rotors, the size of the propellers. And uh, vertical aerospace is using 4 smaller ones. They would show up in the picture, but there you go. So they can be pointed up for vertical takeoff, tilted for cruise, and yet they still both use wings for augmenting the lift. If you're going to be moving forward, you might as well have a wing on it because it's going to give you some lift without having to use any extra energy or mechanisms or things like that. The VX4, this is what this is, and has variants in preliminary design. It must. They don't talk about it, or at least they do, but I haven't found it. But it's got to be rattling around inside of some engineer's head. So this is probably not the end of the line if the company succeeds. As for the company succeeding, one very encouraging thing they've got, and we'll see how long it takes this thing to load again. There you go. They have a pre-order value of $6 billion in terms of 1,500 aircraft. That's an impressive order book to be working from. Especially when you contrast it. Let's see if I can get it down here to some other pictures that they have going by. They were talking about airport connections and things like that. Nothing really long because the batteries are still limiting things. But batteries are changing. There we go. Pretty picture, at least, nothing else. Anyway, $6 billion in orders is in contrast to the company's market cap of $160 million. So even without a premium, that's a six-fold return to reach a $1 billion valuation. Multiply by 6 again to equal the value of those pre-orders, but those pre-orders are probably delivered over years. And yet that's a nice future to work from, especially because success breeds success and improvements can expand product lines. Or innovative vehicles and services can be grounded by conservative bureaucracies, and they have to be conservative. These are flying vehicles over people, with people, and the whole thing. One outlet for the company, though, is the prospect of sales in other countries that may not be as constraining. So just like with some medical devices, they're tried out in other countries before they're tried out, for instance, in the United States. Regardless of where they're going. Now let's go back here, though, before I leave that. Yeah. Regardless of where they're going, it's impressive where they've gotten to because it's non-trivial to get there. Certification looks like it's going to be the primary hurdle, and that's where the conservative bureaucracies step in. You can argue as to whether or not they're overly conservative or under, but there we go. It can be a critical point in the stock price movement. If they reach certification, it's kind of like a drug getting the FDA approval. Government approval of things makes a big difference, or it usually does. But if you look at that stock chart, it had been at over 12, and now it's at under a dollar. The stock price is less than the price of a lottery ticket. That's a low price. Big numbers. Classic reward and risk and reward scenario. There's a big market, but even Boeing and Airbus know that airplane accidents can dramatically impact a stock price. And it's hard to say that a company will never have an accident. And yet, at the same time, is a balancing act, and is the service provided sufficient, and are the accidents small enough? And you can't know. Like I say, look back at the experiences Boeing and Airbus have both had after having been in operation for decades. Things still happen. So there's a lot for Vertical Aerospace to maneuver around. I don't know what's going to happen, but I hope they survive and thrive, and I'll be watching. And I thank you for listening.